Saudi Arabia has been roiled with conflict over the past few days, and it's conflict of both a domestic and an international sort. You have this internal power struggle where people have been rounded up, powerful, wealthy people inside of Saudi Arabia have been rounded up, and then you also have an increasing in the conflict in their ongoing war with Yemen, where over the weekend a ballistic missile was fired from inside of Yemen targeting an airport near Saudi Arabia's capital, something that had not yet happened in this conflict. That missile was shot down. It didn't actually reach its target, but in response, Saudi Arabia launched what has been pitched as, or reporters are saying, is the biggest, most damaging round of airstrikes in any one period since the conflict began. This is a conflict, by the way, that has already killed more than 10,000 civilians. Some people are saying over 13,000, and it's destroyed so much infrastructure that 7 million people are on the brink of famine, and Yemen has been the site of some of the worst cholera outbreaks in recent world history, which this is not the sort of history that you want to be making. Understand, of course, and we've talked about this multiple times, this is a conflict that the US has been aiding the Saudi coalition on by refueling their planes, providing intelligence and logistics, aerial support and things like that. And so this is not a thing that we are innocent on, thanks to Donald Trump's extremely close relationship with the Saudi government. He, for whatever reason, I don't understand it, Alex Jones can't explain it, is a big fan of them. And that continued yesterday with him saying that he has great confidence in King Salman and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. They know exactly what they're doing. Some of those they are harshly treating have been milking their country for years. Now, that is not a reference to the war, that's a reference to the domestic conflict. And here's how that has looked. Earlier this year, the king sacked 2 sitting crown princes. This weekend, he sacked the commander of the Saudi Arabian National Guard. That is a 100,000 soldier strong unit that's supposed to protect the royal family. Damn, they have a lot of bodyguards. That's a lot. But that was the leadership of that was turned around. And there was a greater purge in which 11 princes, 4 ministers, and dozens of officials and businessmen were all arrested. And then those are the people that are still alive. 2 princes were killed. One is rumored to have been shot while resisting arrest. I don't think the shot part is the rumor. I think the resisting arrest part is the rumor. And also another prince died in a helicopter crash near the Yemeni border along with a number of other government officials. Now that is a thing that could happen, certainly. It's also suspiciously timed, although maybe we'll find out more in the future. And so that is the area that Donald Trump is apparently in favor of. Says that these sorts of roundups done for anti-corruption purposes are potentially a good thing. What is your reaction to these situations?
I don't think he knows what he's talking about. I don't think that he has the foreign policy experience to understand the inner dynamics of the Saudi royal family. But I just know that in my lifetime, I've never seen the Saudi royals do this to each other.
Yeah, certainly not this much at once.
No, I've never seen anything like this. I mean, it just kind of seems, and we've talked about the Yemen factor in Saudi Arabia, but what's interesting is they had this bomb that the Yemenis are saying, we did it. Like, we're trying to bomb your airport in Saudi Arabia, but Saudi Arabia is saying, oh no, this was Iran's fault. So that's weird. And then Lebanon is somehow involved. It just seems like everything's hitting the fan in a really, really scary way.
Yeah.
And when it comes to Saudi Arabia, I mean, we have supported them with weapons. That the way that the airport was saved was with an American missile. So we're involved. And
yeah, and I mean, there was that, I don't know for sure that it'll end up going through, but there was that gigantic weapons deal that he pushed for in the wake of his weird crystal ball meeting with the Saudi officials. There was this other deal for billions and billions of dollars of tanks. Like we know that cluster munitions that have been used in Yemen were supplied by the US. There was an attempt to stop those sales, but then the politicians said that that would stigmatize a weapon that in the right circumstance can lower civilian casualties. Yes, that's what cluster munitions are for, making sure that the wrong person doesn't die. Yeah, we are wrapped up in this thing. I mean, the situation in Yemen is about as rough as it gets around the world, other than maybe Syria. And we're a part of that. And he, for whatever reason, whether it's ideological, whether it's business, is going right along with it. And I agree, Iran, that is the big factor here, because that's lurking in the background of this entire Saudi-Yemen conflict. If that goes from being a proxy war effectively, or a half proxy war, to a full-on war between Saudi Arabia and Iran, then you're talking about some serious damage there, because both of them obviously have significant militaries. And I agree with your initial evaluation. I don't know enough about this situation to talk about it, but I guarantee that what I've just told you is greater than the understanding that our president has of this situation. So I feel like he is literally playing with fire when he is blanket signing on to these sorts of purges and all that.
Well, and it's interesting too, like one thing that we skipped over that is kind of strange is that all of these people that have been arrested are being held in the Ritz-Carlton.
Yes.
So nice jail you got there, Saudi Arabia. But
well, they are some of the richest people in the world. I guess they have an
are.
expectation of luxury.
Yeah, and they're getting it.
Yeah.
But that same hotel, there had been this big business conference the week before. And there's a lot of talk about Saudi Arabia's state-owned oil company. Trump wants them to offer shares up in the US stock exchange. Like that's the other thing he's talking about. So he is a business guy.
Yeah.
Like that is his whole persona. And so when I look at this and I see him talking about oil and just praising the king, like I'm thinking that we'll understand Trump much better if we follow the money.
Yeah.
The warring stuff, I don't think he understands it enough. So I just take everything he says with a grain of salt, and I just hope to God the rest of the world does too.
Yeah. I'm a little bit worried that the State Department might be run like Trump steaks.
The State Department's being run by ExxonMobil.
Yeah.
So the fact that there's
and it's
an
being
oil
skeleton
thing
run
here
by
too,
ExxonMobil.
Yeah, and just the oil factor, I don't know what the hell is going on, but it smells like fossil fuels. And it just makes me really nervous.
That is certainly true. And look, it's been obviously not just a dangerous situation; it's been a deadly situation. As I said, over 10,000 civilians have died. That is something that continues to this day. It's a situation where, if you were to go around the country and you were to talk to people about this conflict and our role in it, no one would understand why we are in the position that we're in. I'm not just talking about like hippies. You go to the strongest Trump supporter in the world, and if you don't prime them with Donald Trump loves these dudes, because that will help, they'll be able to swiftly turn around on Saudi Arabia then. If you just talk to them about the situation, why do they want our money being spent in support of this conflict in a part of the world 50% of the population couldn't find on a map, that ideologically they're inherently opposed to, that's killing civilians? Why would anyone be in support of that? And I don't understand why it's the uniform position of our current executive branch to do this with no pushback from the population when there's no support amongst the population.
Support independent media. Come join us at the Young Turks. TYTnetwork.com/join.